Thank you, Chicago. It is nice to have a gathering with a few friends. A small, intimate, quiet get-together. What a turnout, and thank you so much for being here. We are gathered here tonight to complete the political revolution we started 3 years ago. Ago, they thought we were kind of crazy and extreme. Not the case anymore. 3 years ago, the ideas that we brought forth here in Illinois and all over the country were rejected by Democrats. Not anymore. We have begun the political revolution, and now we're gonna complete it. I wanna thank all of you for being part of a campaign which will be unprecedented in modern American history. Our campaign is not only going to win the Democratic nomination, we are not only going to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history. But with your help, we're going to do more than that. We're not only going to defeat Trump, we're going to transform the United States of America. No, it ain't Bernie, it is you. It must be you. And the whole point of the political revolution is that nobody, not Bernie or anybody else, can do it alone. We have got to do it together by the millions. Now we're talking. That's right. Together, not me, but together, we are going to finally in this country create an economy and government that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Together, we are going to create a political system which is based on the democratic principles of one person, one vote, and end a corrupt political system in which billionaires are buying elections. Today, I want to welcome you to a campaign which says loudly and proudly that the underlying principles of our government will not be greed, kleptocracy, hatred, authoritarianism, and pathological lying. The principles of our government will not be racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and religious bigotry. All of that is going to end. The principles of our government will be based on justice, on economic justice, on social justice, on racial justice, and environmental justice. Today, I want to welcome you to a campaign which tells corporate America, the billionaire class, and the other powerful special interests who control so much of our economic and political life that we will no longer tolerate their insatiable greed. A greed which has resulted in our country having more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. Now, I understand that it is not talked about too much in Congress or in the media, but in my view, we can no longer stand idly by and allow 3 families in this country to own more wealth than the bottom half of America. We cannot allow CEOs of major corporations to make over 300 times as much as their workers. We cannot allow the very rich to become even richer, while over 20% of our children live in poverty, while veterans who defended this country sleep out on the streets, and seniors cannot afford the medicine they need. We will no longer accept 46% of all new income going to the top 1%, while millions of Americans are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive, and over half of our people live paycheck to paycheck. We will no longer accept a situation in which, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, our younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents. They will have lower wages, higher debt, unaffordable housing, and less mobility. Now, I've got 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. Downward mobility is not acceptable to me or the American people. Today, we launch the political revolution. But I want you all to be very clear, and it's important that you are understanding what we are up against. This struggle is not just about defeating Donald Trump. This struggle is about taking on the incredibly powerful institutions that control the economic and political life of our country. And I am talking about Wall Street. I am talking about the insurance companies and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry and the military-industrial complex and the prison-industrial complex. Brothers and sisters, there is too much concentration of wealth and power in this country, and this is a fight we are not going to run away from. We believe in democracy, not oligarchy. Today, we say to the private health insurance companies, whether you like it or not, the United States will join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a right. Health care is a human right, not a privilege. And together, we will pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. Today, we say to the pharmaceutical industry that you will no longer charge the American people the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. The result being 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to buy the medicine their doctors prescribe. How crazy is that? Whether they like it or not, the greed of the drug companies is going to end. We're going to lower drug prices in America. Today we say to Walmart and the fast food industry and other low-wage employers, stop paying your workers starvation wages. Yes, we are going to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. It is not a radical idea to suggest that anyone in America who works 40 hours a week should not be living in poverty. And by the way, because we understand that the future of the American middle class is tied into the growth of trade unions, we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. Today, we say to the American people that we will rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our rail systems, our subways, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our airports, and affordable housing. And when we do that, when we put our people to work rebuilding this country, we create up to 13 million good-paying jobs. Today, we say to the parents of young children in this country, we understand that 0 through 4 are the most significant ages of a human being, intellectually and emotionally. The children of this country are our future, and we will establish a high-quality, universal pre-K system. Today, we say to the young people that we want you to get the best education that you can, regardless of the income of your family. Good jobs require a good education, and that is why we will make public colleges and universities tuition-free. And we will end the absurdity of millions of our people forced to pay high interest rates on outrageously high student loan debt. America once had the best educated workforce in the world, and we are going to make that happen again. Today, we say to our senior citizens, we understand you cannot survive on $12,000 or $13,000 a year Social Security. My Republican colleagues in the Senate want to cut Social Security benefits. Well, we've got some bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand extraordinary benefits. Today, we say to Donald Trump and the fossil fuel industry that climate change is not a hoax. But is an existential threat to our country and the entire planet. And we intend to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And in the process, we will create millions of good-paying jobs. It is clear to me that every one of us has a moral responsibility to make certain that we leave to our children and our grandchildren a planet that is healthy and habitable. That's a moral responsibility. Today we say to the American people that instead of demonizing the undocumented immigrants in this country, we're sick and tired of the demonization. We are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. We are going to provide legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And we are going to create a humane border policy for those who seek asylum. The United States of America must never be a country that snatches tiny babies from the arms of their mothers. Today, we say to the top 1% and the large profitable corporations, people who have never had it so good, that under a Bernie Sanders administration, we're going to end the massive tax breaks and loopholes that you currently enjoy. We will no longer accept the absurd situation where large corporations like Amazon, Netflix, and General Motors pay nothing in federal income tax. We will no longer tolerate a situation in which the wealthy and large corporations store tens of billions of dollars in the Cayman Islands and other tax havens. Together, we are going to end austerity for working families and bring some austerity to corporate America. Today, we say to the military-industrial complex that we will not continue to spend $700 billion a year on the military. And that is more than the next 10 nations combined. We are going to invest in affordable housing. We're going to invest in public education. We're going to invest in rebuilding our infrastructure. We are not going to invest in never-ending wars. I should mention to you that this morning, as it happens, I was in Selma, Alabama, to commemorate the 54th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, when civil rights demonstrators were beaten as they marched to the state capitol. They were beaten, and my congressional colleague, John Lewis, was almost killed in that demonstration 54 years ago because people wanted the right to vote. And I must say that it is incomprehensible to me that in the year 2019, we continue to have a president, a Supreme Court, and Republican governors who still are trying to deny people of color and poor people the right to vote. In the last decade, more than 30 states have considered voter suppression laws whose clear intent is to disenfranchise people of color. How pathetic, how cowardly is that? Together, we will end voter suppression in this country. And move to automatic voter registration. If you are a citizen and 18 years of age, you are registered to vote. End of discussion. And when we talk about civil rights, let me become a little bit personal. As some of you may know, I spent 4 years of my life here in Chicago. In the early 60s as a 20-year-old transfer student to the University of Chicago. Now, I said this before, and I'll say it again, that my 4 years here in Chicago was an extraordinary moment in my life and very much shaped my worldview and what I wanted to do. I should also say that while the University of Chicago was and is an excellent school, the truth is that I learned a lot more off campus than in my classrooms. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to your classes. As someone who came from a working class family that didn't have a lot of money, Chicago provided me, for the first time in my life, the opportunity to put two and two together in understanding how the real world worked, to understand what power was about in this country and who the people were who had that power. Those years enabled me to understand a little bit about how wars get started, to learn about racism and poverty and other social ills. My years here in Chicago gave me the opportunity to become involved in the civil rights movement, in the labor movement, in the peace movement, and in electoral politics. So thank you, Chicago, for that opportunity. As a student at the University of Chicago in the early 60s, I became involved with a civil rights organization called the Congress on Racial Equality Corps, which was one of the leading civil rights groups of that period. Now, some of you may not know this, but in the early 1960s, the University of Chicago owned segregated housing. Being audacious young people, black and white, our chapter of CORE wanted to expose the racist housing system run by the university. And so our CORE chapter did something pretty interesting. We sent white couples and black couples into the university-owned housing to pretend that they were looking for an apartment. And you can guess what happened. When the black couples showed up, there were just no apartments available. Sorry about that, there's nothing available for you. But a few hours later, when one of our white couples went in to look for an apartment, somehow, mysteriously, they found a choice of apartments. After documenting that clear pattern of racial discrimination, the students in CORE demanded that the university desegregate its housing. When they refused, we staged one of the first ever civil rights sit-ins in the North. What we were doing here in Chicago at that time was significant, but it came nowhere close to what young people our age were doing in the South in groups like SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We were protesting. They were putting their lives on the line, and some of them, in fact, were murdered. In 1963, I, along with a busload of other students from Chicago, took a 600-mile ride to Washington, D.C. for what remains in my mind an unforgettable day. We went to the nation's capital to participate in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Led by one of the great leaders in American history, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I had the honor of being there to hear him deliver his now famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and that was a day I have never forgotten. But returning home to Chicago, we knew that we had a lot more work to do. At that time, it was 9 years, it had been 9 years since the Brown versus Board of Education decision, Supreme Court decision, that desegregated schools in America. But the school officials here in Chicago at that time had still refused to meaningfully desegregate the city's public schools. Black schools were overcrowded and underfunded, with many students forced to share chairs and desks. Meanwhile, a report at that time found over 380 white classrooms were completely empty. But instead of putting black children in those empty classrooms, the school officials decided to put old trailers, you know what old trailers look like? Put old trailers on the black school grounds. And those trailers were called Willis wagons after the Chicago school superintendent of that time, Mr. Benjamin Willis. Those trailers were a monstrosity. Students would boil in the heat and freeze in the cold. They were infested with rats. They were an insult and a disgrace. And the community fought back. One day, many of us went to the spot where they were planning to put the trailers. We were corralled by the police and told not to cross a line. Well, some of us did cross that line. And, of course, we were arrested. And we spent that night in jail until we were bailed out in the morning by the NAACP. Now, the reason I tell you all of this is because my activities here in Chicago taught me a very important lesson that I have never forgotten. And that is that whether it is the struggle against corporate greed, against racism, sexism, homophobia, environmental devastation, or war and militarism. Real change never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. Have we made progress in civil rights in this country since the early 1960s when I lived here in Chicago? And the answer is yes, we have. But do we still have a very, very long way to go to end the institutional racism which permeates almost every aspect of our society? And the answer is absolutely. Two years ago, we turned on our televisions and we saw Nazis marching in Charlottesville. Nazis marching in the streets of the United States. We have in recent years seen a major spike in hate crimes against blacks, against Muslims, against the gay community, against Jews, against Latinos, and other minorities. And over the last number of years, we have seen a terrible level of police violence against unarmed people in the minority community. Laquan McDonald, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Rekia Boyd, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, and many, many others, people of color, killed by police who should be alive today. Furthermore, we know that African Americans are twice as likely to be arrested and almost 4 times as likely to experience physical force in an encounter with the police. Today, black men are sentenced to 19% more jail time for committing the exact same crime as white men, and African Americans are jailed at more than 5 times the rate of whites. All of this and more is why we are finally going to bring about real criminal justice reform in this country. We are going to end the international embarrassment of having more people in jail than any other country on earth. Instead of spending $80 billion a year on jails and incarceration, we are going to invest in jobs and education. No more private prisons and detention centers. No more war on drugs. No more keeping people in jail because they are too poor to afford cash bail. Real police department reform led at the federal level, which says that lethal force is the last resort, not the first. And by the way, when we talk about criminal justice reform, we are going to change a system in which tens of thousands of Americans every single year get criminal records for possessing marijuana, but not one major Wall Street executive went to jail for destroying our economy in 2008. No, they didn't go to jail. They got a $1 trillion bailout. Our campaign, as you know, is about fundamentally ending the disparity of wealth and power in our country when so few have so much and so many have so little. But as we do that, we must end the disparity within the disparity. Today, the average black family has 1/10 the wealth of the average white family. Today, the infant mortality rate in black communities is more than double the rate for white communities, and the death rate for cancer and almost every disease is far higher for blacks. Black women are 3.5 times more likely to die from pregnancy than white women. Today, Flint, Michigan is still without new pipes for clean water. And it's not just Flint. There are thousands of other communities, often minority communities, where the water that people are drinking, the air that people are breathing, is not fit for human beings. Today, redlining prevents black-owned businesses from getting the loans they need, and predatory lending results in higher interest rates in the African American community. Whether it is a broken criminal justice system or massive disparities in the availability of financial services, or health disparities, or environmental disparities, or educational disparities, our job is, and we will, create a nation in which all people are treated equally. Brothers and sisters, over the last several years, you and I and millions of others have stood up and fought for justice from one end of this country to the other, and we have had some successes. Today, as billionaires and large corporations have attacked unions, destroyed pensions, deregulated the banks, and slashed wages, we have succeeded in raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour in state after state and city after city. And we have forced large corporations like Amazon and Disney to do the same, to pay their workers a living wage. And as teachers all over this country have stood up and fought for a decent education for their kids, we have supported them as they went out on strike. Together, as the forces of militarism have kept us engaged in never-ending wars, we have fought back, and for the first time in 45 years, we have utilized the War Powers Act to move us forward in ending the horrific Saudi-led war in Yemen. Together, as so many of our young people have received criminal records for nonviolent offenses, we have fought to end the war on drugs, and we have seen state after state decriminalize marijuana or legalize marijuana. are beginning to see communities expunging the criminal records of those arrested on marijuana charges. We have won some victories, but our struggles have certainly not always been successful. But I am here tonight to tell you, because of all of the work that we have done together, we are now on the brink of not just winning an election, but transforming this country. And let me tell you what that transformation will look like when we are in the White House. We will enact a federal jobs guarantee to ensure that everyone is guaranteed a stable, decent-paying job. There is more than enough work to be done in this country. Let's go out and do it and put people in those jobs. When we are in the White House, we will attack the problem of urban gentrification, and we will build the affordable housing this country desperately needs. When we are in the White House, we will end the decline of rural America, reopen those rural hospitals that have been closed, support family-based agriculture, and make sure that our young people have decent jobs so that they do not have to leave the small towns they love and where they grew up. When we are in the White House, we will move aggressively to end the epidemic of gun violence in Chicago and in this country. And the NRA notwithstanding, we are going to pass common sense gun safety legislation. When we are in the White House, we are going to protect a woman's right to control her body. That is not a decision for the federal government or the state government or the local government. That is a woman's choice and nobody else's. Brothers and sisters, we have an enormous amount of work in front of us, and the path forward will not be easy because the big money interests will do everything they possibly can to protect their financial interests. And they have an unlimited amount of money at their disposal. But it is an interesting point to make that they may have an unlimited amount of money, but we have something they don't have and never will have, and that is a united people. This is what I believe from the bottom of my heart. And that is, if we do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up, if we stand together as black and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American, if we stand together as gay and straight, if we stand together as native-born and immigrant, if we stand together as women and men, if we stand together, if we stand together, urban and rural, north, south, east, and west, if we understand that there really is no such thing as a red state or a blue state, but that we are a nation in which in every single state, the majority of working people are struggling hard to provide a decent life for their kids. If we stand together, believing in justice and human dignity, if we believe in love and compassion, the truth is, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. Let us go forward together. Thank you.